The shrill wail of a baby pierced through the airplane cabin, its desperate cry cutting through the quiet murmur of the other passengers. Heads turned in unison, eyes narrowing, and a few passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their patience clearly wearing thin. Claire Donovan clutched her 6-month-old son, Leo, tightly against her chest, her arms shaking slightly as she tried to soothe him. She whispered frantic apologies under her breath, desperate for some semblance of calm to return to the crowded space. "Please, Leo, please," Claire murmured, rocking him gently back and forth in her arms, though it seemed like every attempt only made the noise grow louder. The confined space of the airplane cabin felt like a pressure cooker, amplifying every sound. The other passengers' disapproving stares weighed heavily on her, like invisible hands pressing down on her shoulders. She could feel their judgment, the harsh whispers about inconsiderate parents who had no control over their children. Her heart sank as the cries continued, every second of it echoing louder in her mind. "Please, sweetheart, calm down," she whispered again, her voice strained and cracking. The stress of the long journey was taking its toll. Claire hadn't had more than a few hours of sleep in the past 2 days. The double shift at the diner in Los Angeles had been grueling, and then, after a few rushed hours of rest, she had boarded the late-night flight to Chicago. Every penny she had saved for months had gone into buying this last-minute ticket. She couldn't afford to miss her younger sister Olivia's wedding, even if their relationship had been strained for years. At 25, Claire felt older than she was, the exhaustion from juggling motherhood, work, and life's challenges settling deep into her bones. Her appearance told the story of her struggles. The dark circles beneath her brown eyes were a permanent fixture, and the bright smile she once had was now a rare and fleeting sight. Leo's father had disappeared as soon as she told him she was pregnant. Since then, Claire had raised Leo alone in a cramped apartment in the city, struggling to make ends meet. Every day was a battle, choosing between buying diapers or groceries, worrying about whether the electricity bill would be paid on time, or if she'd have to go without her own meals just to keep things running. The weight of it all threatened to crush her spirit, but she kept moving forward, knowing she had no other choice. Claire could feel a presence next to her, and when she looked up, she saw a flight attendant approaching with a look of barely veiled annoyance. The woman was in her 50s, her expression one that clearly conveyed impatience. "Ma'am, you need to calm your baby down," the attendant said, her voice stern and carrying just enough volume to make sure the nearby passengers heard. "Other people are trying to sleep." "I'm trying," Claire whispered, her voice cracking with frustration. She bounced Leo gently, but his cries showed no sign of slowing down. He's usually a calm baby, but he's not sleeping well, and the change in environment, all the noise. Claire trailed off, her words feeling weak and like excuses. She didn't need to explain herself. She knew it was a burden to everyone around her. The baby's cries seemed to grow louder, and Claire noticed several passengers pulling out their phones. It was the all-too-familiar sign of an uncomfortable situation being documented for social media. Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment as she realized that she had become the subject of unwanted attention, likely to be shared online as yet another viral story about the inconsiderate mother on the plane. "Maybe you should have thought about that before booking a flight," an elderly man across the aisle muttered loudly enough for Claire to hear. The words stung, and she couldn't stop the tears from welling up in her eyes. She had considered driving instead of flying, but her old car had broken down weeks ago, and she couldn't afford to fix it. The plane ticket had drained the last of her savings. It was a decision made out of desperation, not choice. And now, she felt like she was paying for it. The thought of dealing with her landlord when she returned home, explaining the late rent, if she could even keep the roof over their heads, was a crushing weight on her chest. Just as Claire was about to escape to the restroom with Leo to try calming him privately, a calm, unexpected voice interrupted her thoughts. "Excuse me, would you mind if I tried something?" Claire looked up to see a man standing beside her. He was in his early 30s, dressed in an expensive navy suit that seemed out of place in the cramped economy section. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and his blue eyes held a warmth that seemed to invite trust. Everything about him screamed wealth and success, from his polished shoes to the gleaming platinum watch on his wrist. Claire couldn't help but wonder what someone like him was doing in her part of the airplane, seated in economy class rather than first class where people of his caliber likely belonged. What?" Claire stammered, still confused by his sudden offer. "I have experience with babies. he said with a reassuring smile. My sister has 3 kids, and I've learned a few tricks over the years. Sometimes, a change in voice or touch can help calm them down. Would you trust me to try? Claire hesitated, a natural wariness creeping in. She had learned to be cautious with strangers, especially men who showed unsolicited interest in her and her son. But there was something about this man's calm demeanor, his gentleness, that made her pause. Maybe it was desperation, or maybe she just needed a break. But something in his eyes made her feel like he wasn't going to harm her. Okay, she whispered, finally relenting. She carefully handed Leo to him, still unsure but too exhausted to protest. The moment the man cradled Leo in his arms, something miraculous happened. Leo's cries began to soften, the sound diminishing slowly until only faint whimpers remained. The man's hand gently circled Leo's back, and he began humming a soft melody that seemed to have an almost magical effect. Claire watched in astonishment, hardly able to believe the sudden shift. She had spent the last few hours trying everything she could think of to calm her son, but nothing had worked. How did you do that? She breathed, her voice filled with wonder. Like I said, the man replied quietly, lots of practice. He smiled down at Leo, continuing his gentle motions. Sometimes babies just need a change of scenery, or in this case, a change of arms. Around them, the mood in the cabin shifted. The previously irritated passengers, who had been glaring at Claire moments before, now observed the scene with a mixture of curiosity and approval. The flight attendant even smiled as she walked past, nodding in approval. What's his name? The man asked, still holding Leo with surprising ease, as if he had done this 1,000 times before. Leo, Claire replied, her voice still a little shaky. She studied the man more closely now, wondering why he felt so familiar. I'm Claire, she added, her eyes narrowing as she tried to place him. Thank you so much for doing that. I was about to lose it. Nice to meet you both, the man said warmly. I'm Adam, and don't worry about it. We've all been there. Maybe not with a baby, but we've all had those moments where everything feels overwhelming. As Adam continued to hold Leo, Claire found herself unexpectedly relaxed. For the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to breathe without the constant pressure of responsibility weighing on her. She could finally relax, her mind unwinding with the lull of the airplane's steady hum. Adam continued to talk softly, the soothing cadence of his voice somehow helping Claire forget, just for a moment, the chaos of her life back home. As Claire sat there, allowing herself to rest, the weight of the past few days seemed to lift. She had been running on fumes, between working long shifts, managing motherhood on her own, and dealing with financial uncertainty. She had almost forgotten what it felt like to just breathe. Adam's calming presence was the first break she'd had in what felt like forever. Leo, nestled peacefully in his arms, had finally settled into a deep, contented sleep. Claire couldn't help but watch him, astonished by how naturally Adam held her son. Despite the obvious difference in their worlds, something about his gesture, holding her baby as if it were the most natural thing in the world, touched her heart. The gentle hum of the airplane and the faint rustle of overhead compartments slowly lulled Claire into a state of half-sleep. She felt safe, for the first time in a long while, in a way she hadn't allowed herself to feel. You're not in economy, are you? She asked suddenly, her curiosity piqued. She had been too distracted before to really study Adam's appearance. He looked like someone who should have been in first class, not here with the rest of them, squeezed into the cramped space of coach. Adam smiled, though there was something elusive about his expression. No, I'm not, he admitted. But I don't always follow the rules of the typical traveler. I like to mix things up a bit. First class is predictable. Here, you get to meet real people. Claire blinked, a bit taken aback by his words. There was something humble in the way he said it, a rare humility that was almost endearing. Most people she had met who were wealthier, like the clients she served in the diner, often exuded an air of superiority. But Adam didn't seem to have that. He seemed grounded. So, you just wanted to get to know the real people? She asked, her tone both incredulous and impressed. I suppose you could say that, Adam said with a light chuckle. I've seen enough of the high-flying business world. The more I experience, the more I believe that real connections happen in unexpected places, even in an economy seat on a late-night flight. Claire didn't know what to make of his comment. It was the kind of thing a person might say to sound humble, but there was something in the way he spoke that made it sound authentic. She found herself warming to him, though she still felt like there was something she didn't understand about him. Before Claire could respond, Adam's expression turned serious, and he gave her a quiet, understanding look. "I'm guessing you're heading to Chicago for something important." Claire hesitated. The past 2 days had been a whirlwind of emotions, trying to get Leo settled, juggling a slew of difficult financial decisions, and now this stranger holding her son like it was the most natural thing in the world. It was hard for her to admit, even to herself, that the reason she was flying to Chicago was for a wedding that she was unsure about attending. "Yes," Claire said softly, looking down at Leo. "My sister is getting married. It's complicated. We haven't spoken in a long time." Adam nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "Family dynamics can be tricky," he said gently. "But it sounds like you're doing what you can to be there for her. That's admirable." Claire felt a lump rise in her throat. She hadn't told anyone, least of all Adam, the full extent of her relationship with her sister Olivia. The fight that had torn them apart felt so raw, so personal, but hearing Adam's words made her feel understood, even in the absence of full details. "You know, I've had my own issues with family," Adam said after a moment, catching her eye. "But I've learned that sometimes it takes something big to shift things, to realize what really matters. Maybe this wedding is that moment for you." Claire looked up at him, surprised. How did he know? She didn't know whether to be comforted or unsettled by his ability to understand. She hadn't said a word about her strained relationship with Olivia, yet Adam seemed to know exactly what she was feeling. "How do you know all that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Adam smiled, a rueful, self-aware smile. "Sometimes we all need a little perspective. I've had plenty of moments where I needed someone to point out what I was too blind to see. Maybe I'm just giving you the benefit of my own lessons." His words lingered in the air for a moment. Claire couldn't help but feel a warmth toward this stranger, this man who had helped her, even when she hadn't asked for help. It felt good to talk to someone who wasn't judging her, who wasn't looking at her with pity or disdain. The plane began its descent into Chicago, and Adam shifted, carefully cradling Leo in his arms as the cabin began to fill with the sounds of passengers preparing for landing. Claire felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. She was about to reach her destination, an unfamiliar, tense reunion, but she didn't feel as anxious as she had when the flight began. For once, someone had helped her without expecting anything in return. It was a strange, rare kindness, and for the first time in a long while, Claire allowed herself to appreciate it. "I should probably take him back," Claire said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. Leo, still resting in Adam's arms, was sleeping soundly. It was a peaceful sight, one Claire had hoped for in vain earlier. "He's fine here if you want to rest," Adam offered, his voice warm and reassuring. "You've been up for a long time. You look like you could use a break." Claire considered his offer for a moment, the exhaustion in her bones urging her to take him up on it. But the mother in her, the one who had carried Leo through every moment of his short life, felt an overwhelming need to hold him close again. "I really should," she said, reaching for Leo. I don't even know how to thank you. You've saved me from losing it in front of all these people." Adam's smile was soft and understanding. "No thanks necessary. Just pay it forward when you can." As the plane touched down and the passengers began to file out of the cabin, Claire found herself feeling lighter. The past few days hadn't been easy, but she had made it through. And for the first time in a long while, she felt like she might just be able to handle the challenges ahead. As the plane taxied toward the gate, Claire clutched Leo in her arms, feeling a quiet peace she hadn't experienced in months. Her eyes were heavy with exhaustion, but there was something comforting in the rhythm of the plane's movement and the gentle hum of the engine. For the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't feel like everything was crumbling around her. She could feel Adam's presence beside her, steady and calm, like a lifeline in the chaos. Passengers shuffled to their feet, gathering their things in a hurry, eager to disembark. But Claire stayed seated for a moment longer, watching Adam as he stood up, his tall frame stretching after the long flight. He was so effortlessly composed, his posture confident and unassuming. There was a quiet elegance to him, despite the fact that he was dressed so simply. She couldn't help but wonder about his life, about the kind of world he lived in compared to hers. He had helped her, yes, but there was still something about him that seemed so out of reach. "Well, I guess this is where we part ways," Claire said softly, lifting her eyes to meet his. The thought of leaving this brief encounter behind made her heart ache, though she couldn't explain why. She had barely known Adam for a few hours, yet it felt like he had shared something deeper with her than most people ever did. Adam smiled warmly, his expression sincere. "I don't think we're really parting ways, Claire," he said, his voice low and reassuring. "You never know where life might lead us." Claire was about to respond, but a jolt of panic surged through her. The flight attendant had already made her way down the aisle, directing passengers off the plane. Her mind flicked to the anxiety that had been with her ever since she received the invitation to Olivia's wedding. The moment she would have to face her sister, deal with the tension that had built over the years, was drawing near. It felt like a storm waiting to break, and Claire was no longer sure she had the strength to face it. "I need to go," Claire murmured, standing up and shifting Leo in her arms. "Thank you again for everything, Adam. I'm not sure what I would have done without your help." Before he could respond, she moved quickly toward the door, her mind swirling with the weight of the upcoming confrontation. Adam's voice called after her, but she didn't turn back. She needed to face this moment on her own, to take one step forward even though she had no idea what awaited her on the other side. The airport in Chicago was chaotic, as always, with travelers hustling to their next destination, families reunited, and people carrying their personal baggage in every form imaginable. Claire moved through the crowd with a sense of quiet determination, feeling like an outsider in the bustling terminal. She had always been a bit of a loner, preferring the quiet moments alone with Leo, away from the judgment of the world. But today she felt more exposed than ever. She headed for baggage claim, trying to focus on the task at hand. Leo was still asleep in her arms, his little face calm and peaceful, unaware of the storm she was about to face. As she stood there, watching the bags circle around the carousel, she couldn't help but replay the last few hours in her mind. She thought about Adam, the way he had cared for Leo with such tenderness, his quiet, unspoken understanding. What kind of man was he, really? She had been so caught up in her own struggles, in the exhaustion of motherhood and life, that she hadn't stopped to truly consider the person who had helped her. His kindness had come without any expectation of return, and that made her wonder. Did people like him exist just to prove that the world wasn't entirely cruel? She shook the thought from her mind. She couldn't afford to dwell on it. She had too many other things to worry about. Claire's phone buzzed in her pocket, and she pulled it out, seeing a text from Olivia. "Olivia, rehearsal dinner is at 7. You still coming to the wedding tomorrow?" Claire stared at the message, her fingers hovering over the keys. She hadn't even answered Olivia's previous texts, let alone responded to her invitation to the rehearsal dinner. Olivia hadn't made things easy for her over the years, and Claire wasn't sure she was ready to face her sister again, especially after everything that had happened. But the wedding was an event she couldn't ignore. It was family, after all, and despite everything, Olivia was still her sister. Taking a deep breath, Claire typed back, "Claire, yes, I'll be there." She hit send and immediately regretted it. She hadn't said anything about the tension between them, the years of silence, the unresolved hurt that lingered like a shadow. But she didn't want to engage in a battle of words through text. She just had to face this, once and for all. As the last bag appeared on the carousel, Claire grabbed her duffel and headed toward the exit. She wasn't sure what to expect when she walked into that wedding tomorrow, but she knew it wouldn't be easy. She wasn't the same woman who had left Los Angeles, but she still wasn't sure if she was ready to face the ghosts of her past. The motel room. By the time Claire reached the motel where she'd be staying for the weekend, the weight of the day had begun to sink in. The room was exactly as she had expected. Small, dimly lit, and far from the comfort of the home she had once dreamed of. The carpet was stained in places, the air stale, and the thin walls allowed every conversation from the neighboring rooms to creep into her space. But none of that mattered as much as the quiet ache in her chest, the ache that came from walking away from Adam earlier. She sat on the edge of the bed, clutching Leo tightly to her chest as she stared at the walls, lost in her thoughts. It wasn't just the exhaustion that weighed on her now. It was the uncertainty about everything. The uncertainty about her sister, about the future, and about the strange encounter with Adam. She couldn't help but wonder if she had misunderstood the situation, if his kindness had been something deeper than just charity. But what was she supposed to do with that? Her phone buzzed again, and this time it was from Olivia. "Olivia, I'll see you at the rehearsal dinner. Don't forget to be on time. It's important." Claire read the text and let out a quiet sigh. The words were polite, but they carried an unmistakable edge. She wasn't sure if Olivia truly wanted her there, or if she was just trying to check off the box of family obligation. But Claire couldn't dwell on that now. She needed to be strong, for Leo and for herself. The bed felt cold beneath her, the sheets rough against her skin as she lay back, letting her mind drift. What had she expected from this trip? A reunion? A healing of old wounds? Or maybe just an escape from the crushing weight of her everyday life? As she stared at the ceiling, the events of the past few days played through her mind again. Adam's quiet strength, his willingness to help her, the kindness he had shown without asking for anything in return. For a moment, she let herself imagine a life where she didn't have to constantly fight, where kindness wasn't rare, where she could just breathe. But that life didn't exist. Not yet. The next morning came far too soon. Claire awoke with a heavy sense of dread hanging over her. The motel room was still as unwelcoming as it had been the night before, and the discomfort of the bed did little to help her body recover from the exhaustion of the past few days. Leo, still sound asleep, lay beside her, his tiny hands curled in the blankets. For a moment, Claire just watched him, the soft rise and fall of his chest grounding her in the present. Her phone buzzed again, and this time it was a reminder. Olivia, rehearsal dinner is in a few hours. Remember, I expect you to be there. It's important. Claire sighed, her heart heavy with uncertainty. The thought of seeing Olivia after everything that had happened between them made her stomach turn. She had spent so many years avoiding this moment, the inevitable confrontation between sisters who had once been so close and yet had drifted so far apart. The wedding had brought them back together, but Claire wasn't sure if she was ready for this. But she had no choice. Leo stirred beside her, and Claire's attention snapped back to him. She smiled softly as his eyes fluttered open. "Good morning, sweetheart," she whispered, brushing a stray lock of hair from his face. "We have a big day ahead of us." Leo gurgled happily, a small smile tugging at his lips. Claire couldn't help but smile back, even though the anxiety gnawed at her insides. She had to do this for him. She had to make the effort to show up, to be there, even if it was difficult. He deserved to see family, even if it was fractured, even if it was complicated. After a quick breakfast in the motel room, Claire dressed in the simple clothes she had brought for the event, trying her best to feel confident despite the lack of a real wardrobe. She wasn't used to these kinds of events, the kinds of gatherings where everyone dressed in their finest clothes, where people mingled effortlessly, and where she felt like an outsider. She knew she'd stick out like a sore thumb, her modest attire and tired face a stark contrast to the polished elegance that would surround her. She sighed, adjusting Leo in his carrier. He was the only comfort she had at the moment, his presence grounding her in a world that often felt too big and too harsh. The wedding venue. The venue was everything Claire had expected and more, grand, elegant, and sparkling with opulence. The high ceilings were draped with white linens, the long tables adorned with delicate floral arrangements, and the polished floors gleamed with the reflection of chandeliers hanging overhead. It was a far cry from the modest world Claire had come from. The guests were already mingling, dressed in their finest attire, and Claire felt like a stranger in their midst. She adjusted Leo's carrier again, trying to steady her nerves as she entered the reception hall. The music was soft, and the chatter was light, but every conversation felt like a reminder of how out of place she was. She spotted Olivia across the room, standing with her new husband, laughing with guests as they shared a joke. For a moment, Claire felt a pang of jealousy. Olivia had always been the one to have it all together. She had been the one who went to college, found a good job, and now, she was married to someone who looked like he belonged in a magazine. Claire had chosen a different path, one that had led her here, to this moment of tension and uncertainty. But as she looked at Leo, her heart softened. She had made the right choices for him. She had to believe that. Olivia caught sight of her then, and their eyes met across the crowded room. Claire's breath caught in her throat as she tried to smile, but the weight of everything that had happened between them made it hard to muster any warmth. Olivia's expression was unreadable, and for a moment, Claire wasn't sure how to approach her. She had hoped for a reconciliation, but the years of hurt and resentment seemed insurmountable. But Olivia moved toward her, her heels clicking softly on the floor, and Claire's stomach tightened in response. When they were finally face to face, Olivia smiled, a thin, strained smile, and extended her hand. "Claire," she said softly, her voice polite but distant, "I'm glad you could make it. I know this isn't easy for you. Claire hesitated, unsure how to respond. Part of her wanted to say something harsh, to let out the frustrations that had built up over the years. But she bit her lip and kept quiet. She had come here to heal, not to rehash old wounds. Thanks for inviting me, Claire replied, her voice barely above a whisper. I know it's been a while. Olivia nodded, her eyes flickering with something Claire couldn't quite read. Yeah, a lot has happened. But we're family, Claire. We have to start somewhere, right? The words were simple, but they stung. It was as if Olivia was giving her a chance. But Claire couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't enough. There was so much left unsaid between them, and Claire wasn't sure if either of them was ready to bridge the gap. The awkward silence hung between them for a moment before Olivia broke it. Would you like something to drink? She asked, her voice still polite but colder than Claire would have liked. I can introduce you to some of the guests. Claire nodded, not knowing what else to say. Sure, that sounds fine. As they walked together through the crowd, Claire couldn't help but notice how different Olivia seemed now. She wasn't the same sister Claire remembered. The carefree woman with the bright smile who always seemed to have everything under control. There was a tension in Olivia's posture, a tightness around her eyes that Claire couldn't ignore. I've missed you, Olivia said suddenly, her voice softer now. I know things have been difficult between us, but I don't want to keep pushing you away. I didn't know how to reach you. Claire stopped in her tracks, surprised by the admission. I didn't know how to reach you either, she said, her voice thick with emotion. It's been so hard, Olivia. I've been struggling, and you've been living a completely different life. I didn't know where I fit in anymore. Olivia's face softened, and she reached out to place a hand on Claire's arm. You fit, Claire, she said quietly. I just didn't know how to make it right, not after everything we said to each other. But we can try, okay? We have to try. For the first time in a long time, Claire felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this reunion could be the start of something new, something better. Later in the evening, after the dinner and the toasts, Claire found herself sitting at a quiet corner of the reception, watching the guests dance and mingle. Leo had fallen asleep in his carrier beside her, and Claire was lost in her thoughts when she felt a presence beside her. She looked up to find Adam standing there, his expression warm as he looked at her. Mind if I sit? He asked, his voice casual but kind. Claire smiled, surprised but relieved. Of course. I didn't expect to see you here. Adam chuckled, sitting down beside her. I told you I liked to mix things up. I wanted to see if you'd actually show up. Claire blinked, feeling a mix of confusion and gratitude. You knew I was coming? Not exactly, Adam said with a smile. But when I heard there was a wedding, I figured it was a good chance to reconnect. And besides, I wanted to make sure you were okay after everything that happened. Claire felt her heart soften. Despite all the distance, despite the unknowns about Adam's life, he seemed genuinely concerned. I'm fine, she said softly. It's just complicated. But thank you. Really. Adam looked at her, his expression thoughtful. I understand. You don't have to explain it all. Just know that, if you ever need someone to talk to, you're not alone in this. I've been where you are. For the first time in a long time, Claire felt like someone truly understood. And that made all the difference. The evening continued, the hum of soft music mixing with the low murmur of conversations and laughter. Claire glanced around the room, feeling like an outsider in the sea of elegant dresses and finely tailored suits. Olivia, the bride, was the center of attention, and Claire was relieved to see her sister smiling brightly, her face radiant with happiness. But even in the midst of the festivities, Claire couldn't shake the undercurrent of discomfort. She had come to the wedding out of obligation, but now that she was here, she realized how much more she had been avoiding. Olivia's wedding wasn't just a celebration. It was a symbol of everything Claire felt she had missed out on. The life Olivia had built seemed so perfect, so structured, while Claire had been fighting to survive, to keep going for Leo, to make it through each day. Everything okay? Adam's voice broke through her thoughts again, and Claire turned to see him sitting beside her. He had left her alone earlier in the evening, but now, here he was, appearing once again like some kind of comforting anchor in the midst of her storm. Yeah, Claire said with a tight smile, trying to mask her inner turmoil. Just a little overwhelmed, I guess. Adam leaned in slightly, his presence calming. I get it. Family events like this can be difficult, especially when the past has a way of creeping back in. Claire looked at him, surprised by how well he seemed to understand. There was an authenticity in his tone, one that made her feel like she could trust him, even though they had only just met. "It's not just the family stuff," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think it's more the realization that I'm not where I thought I would be. I thought I'd have it all figured out by now." Adam nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "I've been there too. I think everyone has that moment, you know? The point where they realize that life doesn't follow the plan. But that doesn't mean it's not worth living. You've made it this far. That's something." Claire blinked, the truth of his words striking deep. She had spent so much time trying to hold on to the idea of what her life should have been like. But now, hearing Adam's words, she realized she had already come so far. Maybe it wasn't perfect, but it was hers. And Leo, with all his little smiles and sweet moments, made every bit of it worth it. "I'm sorry," Adam continued, his voice soft but firm. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. I know what it's like to feel like you're stuck in the middle of your own life, unable to move forward because everything feels so uncertain." The vulnerability in his voice caught Claire off guard. It was like he wasn't just trying to comfort her, but also sharing a piece of his own struggle. "It's okay," Claire said, finally letting out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. "I think I've been afraid to face the uncertainty. I've been so focused on just surviving, on keeping everything afloat, that I forgot to take a moment to breathe." Adam smiled softly. "Sometimes that's all we need to do. Take a breath." Later in the evening, as the festivities began to slow down, Claire found herself face to face with Olivia again. This time, the air between them felt different, less strained, less like a battlefield. Olivia was standing near the bar, talking to a few of her friends, but when she saw Claire approaching, her face softened, and she excused herself from the conversation. "Hey," Olivia said, her voice quieter now, the formality of their previous interactions seemingly dropping away. "I've been thinking about what you said earlier, about how we haven't really talked in a while." Claire nodded, unsure how to navigate this new territory. It felt like they were both walking on eggshells, trying to avoid the cracks that had formed in their relationship. "I know it's been a long time," Claire replied carefully. "I didn't expect things to just go back to normal. I don't think they can." Olivia's gaze flickered with something unreadable. "You're right," she said, her tone softening. "Things can't go back to how they were before. But that doesn't mean we can't try to fix them." Claire swallowed, the weight of Olivia's words settling in her chest. She wanted to believe it, wanted to believe that something good could come from all the pain they had gone through, but it felt so fragile. "I don't know if I'm ready to forgive everything that happened," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "But I'm here. I'm trying." Olivia reached out then, her hand resting lightly on Claire's arm, an unspoken gesture of peace. "I know it's not easy," she said softly, "but I'm not going anywhere. And I want you in my life, Claire. I just need to know if you want the same." For a long moment, Claire stood there, unsure what to say. There was so much history between them, so much hurt that couldn't be undone with just a few words. But there was also something else, something buried deep beneath the years of resentment. She had spent so long hiding from Olivia, from her own family, that she had forgotten what it felt like to be part of something bigger than herself. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady but uncertain. "I don't know yet, but I'll try. For us. For Leo." Olivia smiled then, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "That's all I can ask for." As the night wore on, Claire found herself once again by the edge of the dance floor, watching the happy couple spin beneath the soft lighting. Leo was asleep in his carrier, and Claire, despite the chaos around her, was finally starting to feel a sense of peace. She had made it through the evening, through the difficult conversations and unspoken tensions. And now she was just here, present. Her thoughts were interrupted when she heard a familiar voice. "You look like you're finally starting to enjoy yourself." She turned to find Adam standing beside her, his hands casually tucked into his pockets, his expression amused but kind. "I'm not sure about enjoying myself," Claire replied with a small laugh, "but I'm definitely here." Adam smiled, his blue eyes softening. "That's the first step. Sometimes just showing up is all you need to do." Claire found herself smiling back, a little more genuinely this time. "I guess you're right." There was a long pause as they both watched the celebration unfold. The music was soft now, more of a background hum to the chatter of the guests. Adam's presence beside her, though, was comforting in a way she hadn't expected. He wasn't just a stranger anymore. He had become someone she could rely on, even if just for a moment. You've been a good friend to me, Claire said quietly, turning to face him fully. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't been there. Tonight, I mean. With everything. Adam shrugged, his smile kind but humble. I was just doing what anyone would do. But his eyes betrayed something deeper. A sincerity that Claire hadn't expected. I'm glad I could help, though. I think sometimes we all just need someone to remind us that we're not alone. Claire's heart tightened as she looked at him. Thank you, she whispered. For everything. The night was beginning to wind down, and the once bustling wedding reception had softened into a quieter, more intimate atmosphere. People were either winding down, heading out, or deep in conversation with loved ones they hadn't seen in years. Claire had retreated to a quiet corner of the room, where she could gather her thoughts and reflect on the strange turn of events that had brought her to this point. She had spent so many years running from her past, avoiding the uncomfortable truths about her relationship with Olivia, keeping herself isolated in the shadows of her own life. But now, standing here, she realized how much she had been missing. She had always thought she needed to keep everything together on her own, but in these brief moments with Adam and her sister, she saw that there was strength in vulnerability. Adam's voice broke through her thoughts again. Are you sure you're okay? He asked gently. Claire turned to face him, the expression on his face full of concern. He had remained by her side throughout the evening, never pushing, just offering quiet support when she needed it most. Yeah, she said, managing a small smile. I think I'm finally starting to be okay. Adam nodded, his gaze lingering on her for a moment, as though measuring the weight of her words. It's okay if it's not all okay right now, he said quietly. Life doesn't work like that. But you've made it this far, Claire. That's worth something. The sincerity in his voice was like a balm to her tired soul. She had been so consumed with surviving, with keeping up the appearance of strength, that she had forgotten how to let go of the weight she had been carrying. But Adam's calm, understanding nature was slowly dismantling those walls, piece by piece. As the last few songs played in the background, and the guests began to gather their belongings, Claire felt her phone buzz in her pocket. She checked it quickly and saw a text from Olivia. Olivia, I think we should talk. Tomorrow, before you leave. The words caught Claire off guard. Olivia wanted to talk. After everything, after all the years of silence and tension, she wanted to have a real conversation. I'll need to head back soon, Claire said softly, more to herself than to Adam. She stared at the message, her mind already racing ahead to the conversation that would surely take place tomorrow. She didn't know what would come of it, but she couldn't back away now. Not when she was so close to something that might heal the rift between them. Adam noticed the shift in her demeanor, his sharp eyes catching the change in her mood. You okay? He asked, his voice full of empathy. Claire nodded slowly. I think I will be, she said, the words feeling more hopeful than she had expected them to. When Claire returned to the motel room later that night, the exhaustion of the day settled heavily on her shoulders. Leo had been asleep for most of the evening, and Claire found herself grateful for the peace that his tiny form brought. She placed him gently in his carrier and sank down onto the bed beside him, letting the quiet of the room wash over her. She pulled her knees to her chest, staring at the dim light from the bedside lamp as her thoughts swirled. What had really changed since she arrived in Chicago? So much of her life had been wrapped up in survival and emotional armor, but now she found herself standing at a crossroads. Could she truly rebuild the bridge with Olivia? Could she reconcile the two versions of herself? The mother who fought so fiercely to protect Leo, and the sister who had long been lost in a sea of hurt. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Adam, the words simple yet comforting. Adam, if you need anything tomorrow, just let me know. Don't forget to breathe. You're doing better than you think. Claire stared at the message, a soft smile tugging at her lips. She hadn't expected such kindness, especially from someone she barely knew. But there it was. Adam had been there for her when she needed someone the most, even in the smallest ways. He reminded her that it was okay to take a moment, to breathe, to give herself the space to feel everything she had been suppressing. Her finger hovered over the keyboard for a moment, unsure if she should respond. But then she realized something. For the first time in so long, she didn't need to carry the weight alone. Adam's words, his presence had shown her that it was okay to let go, to trust, to ask for help when she needed it. Claire, thank you. I won't forget. With a deep breath, Claire put her phone down and finally allowed herself to lie back, closing her eyes for the first time that day. Tomorrow would come with its own challenges, but for now she would rest. She would take this moment to just be, without the constant pressure of keeping everything in check. As her eyes fluttered shut, she thought of Olivia, of the conversation that awaited her, and for the first time felt a small thread of hope that maybe, just maybe, this chapter of her life could start to heal. And as the night settled in, Claire found herself drifting into sleep, the quiet hum of the motel's old air conditioning lulling her into a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. The next morning, the sunlight streaming through the motel curtains woke Claire the next morning, its soft warmth spilling over her face. She groggily rubbed her eyes, the remnants of the night's sleep still clinging to her. Leo, as usual, had woken before her, his soft cooing filling the quiet room. Claire sat up, stretching the kinks out of her back, and went over to her son's carrier to check on him. "Good morning, little one," she whispered, smiling down at him as he gazed up at her with wide, innocent eyes. She quickly got ready for the day, brushing her hair and slipping on a clean shirt. As she dressed, her mind wandered back to her conversation with Olivia the night before, and the message she had sent that still weighed on Claire's thoughts. They would talk today. Olivia had invited her to meet before she left, and Claire knew this was the moment, perhaps the only moment, where things could either be repaired or broken beyond repair. At the wedding venue. When Claire arrived at the wedding venue the next day, it was quieter than the day before. The guests were beginning to filter out, the after-party winding down. Olivia was waiting by the doors, her face no longer the perfect bride, but a woman who had come to a place of reflection. She stood tall, her arms crossed, as if bracing for the difficult conversation that awaited them both. "Claire," Olivia said softly, her eyes searching Claire's face for any sign of what might come. "I didn't think we'd be here, but I'm glad we are." Claire nodded slowly, her breath shaky. "I didn't either," she admitted. "But I want to try. For us." Olivia's face softened, and she took a small step toward Claire, as if to close the distance between them. "I know I wasn't there for you the way I should have been," she said, her voice full of vulnerability. "I was selfish, and I pushed you away when you needed me the most. I'm sorry, Claire. I'm really sorry." The sincerity in Olivia's voice broke something inside Claire, and she felt her own tears start to form. All the walls that had been up for so long began to crack, and she finally allowed herself to feel everything she had been holding back for years. "I've been angry for so long," Claire said, her voice trembling. "But I've missed you, Olivia. I don't know how to fix everything, but I want to try." For a moment, there was only silence between them, the weight of their past hanging heavily in the air. Then Olivia reached out, taking Claire's hands in hers. "We'll figure it out," Olivia said softly. "One step at a time." The moment was delicate, fragile even. The weight of the years between Claire and Olivia was palpable. Yet something about their shared silence felt like the beginning of a shift, of something that could mend the cracks in their relationship. Claire squeezed Olivia's hands gently, feeling the warmth and sincerity of her sister's touch. It had been so long since they had shared something like this, so long since they had truly acknowledged each other as sisters, not just two women caught in the tangled mess of unresolved emotions. "I don't know what to say," Claire admitted, her voice quiet, vulnerable. "But I want to believe that we can make this work. I don't want to stay stuck in the past anymore." Olivia nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I've spent so much time wishing things could go back to the way they were, but I know that's not possible. We can't erase the hurt, but maybe we can start building something new, something stronger." For the first time in years, Claire felt a genuine sense of hope bloom within her. It wasn't a perfect solution, and there was no guarantee that everything would be smooth sailing from here on out. But the willingness to try, to truly try, was something she hadn't expected. It felt like the first step in healing, both for her and for Olivia. "I'd like that," Claire said softly, her voice breaking just a little. I think I've been so angry for so long that I forgot what it felt like to be close to you." Olivia's expression softened, her shoulders relaxing as the tension that had been there for so long slowly began to lift. "I'm sorry for pushing you away, Claire. I never meant to make you feel like you weren't important to me." Claire's heart tightened at the sincerity in her sister's voice. All the hurt, the years of silent battles, seemed to dissolve in that moment, leaving behind a fragile but genuine bond. "I know you didn't mean it," Claire whispered, "but we can't keep holding on to old things. I can't keep holding on to the anger, and I don't think you can either. Olivia smiled, a tear finally escaping down her cheek. We can move forward together. For Leo, for us. Together, Claire echoed, her voice steady now. It wasn't a promise of perfection, but it was a promise of effort. A promise to be present, to rebuild what had been broken. For the first time in so many years, Claire felt like she had a place in her family again. A place where she wasn't just fighting to survive. She had a sister, and even though the road ahead would be challenging, they could face it together. As the day wound down and the guests slowly filtered out, the once vibrant atmosphere of the wedding reception faded into quiet conversations and soft farewells. Claire had spent the rest of the evening reconnecting with Olivia, talking about everything and nothing. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. And for Claire, progress was everything. As she gathered her belongings, Leo still asleep in his carrier, she turned to Olivia one last time before she left. I'll keep in touch, Claire said, a sense of finality in her voice. I'm not going anywhere this time. I know, Olivia replied, her voice full of warmth and understanding. We'll make this work. One step at a time, Claire. Claire nodded, feeling the weight of the moment settle in her chest. It was the beginning of something new, something she had been afraid to acknowledge. The past couldn't be erased, but it could be reframed, rebuilt like the foundation of a house, brick by brick, crack by crack. And with Leo in her arms, Claire finally felt ready to move forward, ready to build something better than she had ever imagined. As she stepped outside into the cool evening air, Claire couldn't help but smile. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was on the right path. She had made peace with her sister, begun to heal the wounds that had festered for so long, and she had learned that it was okay to let others in, to ask for help when needed. Unexpected twist, Adam's revelation. The next morning, Claire received a message from Adam. Adam, I know this might seem strange, but I wanted to be honest with you. I didn't just want to help you, because I saw you struggling. There's more to it than that. Claire raised an eyebrow as she read the message. What did he mean? Had she misinterpreted his intentions? Claire, what do you mean? Adam, it's hard to explain, but I've been following your story for a while, Claire. The struggles you've been through, raising Leo on your own, working 2 jobs, making ends meet. I've been watching you, and I wanted to help because I've been where you are. My mother was a single mom, and I grew up watching her fight every day to give me a better life. I've made it my mission to help people in your situation, not because it's charity, but because I understand. Claire stared at the phone in her hands, her mind reeling. She had thought that Adam's kindness was just a momentary act of compassion, but it turned out there was much more behind it. He had been watching her, observing her struggles, long before they met on that flight. Claire, I don't know what to say. Adam, you don't need to say anything. I just wanted you to know that everything I did, every gesture, wasn't about pity. It was about understanding. I've seen what it's like to feel like you're invisible, to be looked at like you're less than. But you're not. You're strong, Claire. Stronger than you know. Claire's heart skipped a beat as she processed his words. She had felt so alone, so isolated for so long. But Adam had been there, quietly watching, not out of pity, but out of genuine empathy. It made her question everything she thought she knew about the world. People like him didn't exist in her world. But here he was, showing her that there was more to life than survival. Claire, thank you for telling me. I don't know if I understand everything yet, but I'm grateful. Adam, if you ever need anything, anything at all, don't hesitate to reach out. You and Leo deserve better than what life has given you so far. Claire sat back, overwhelmed by the weight of his words. She had come to Chicago to attend a wedding, to face her sister. But in the process, she had uncovered a deeper connection, a reminder that there were still people out there who cared, people who understood. She stared at the message for a moment longer, then typed back. Claire, I'll keep that in mind. Thank you, Adam. The beginning of a new journey. As Claire packed her bags to leave Chicago, she felt a sense of closure. The wedding had been a turning point, not just in her relationship with Olivia, but in her own journey of self-acceptance. The road ahead would be full of challenges, but Claire no longer felt like she was walking it alone. With Leo by her side, her sister by her heart, and the kindness of people like Adam, she was ready to face whatever came next. As she walked out of the motel and into the early morning light, Claire knew that this was just the beginning. The future was uncertain, but she was finally ready to embrace it. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she had a chance at happiness. Not the perfect kind of happiness she had once imagined, but the kind that came from living authentically, from opening up to love, to kindness, and to the possibility of change.